Good morning, everyone. We're going to jump back in here in just a minute to the book of Exodus as we continue our study here. And noticing that as we look at the things happening with Moses and the Israelites at this time, of course, they've been rescued out of Egyptian bondage, and the law that they're receiving, and even as we get into in the next couple chapters, the building of the tabernacle and all the furnishings of the tabernacle. These were all examples of what the real kingdom was going to be like, or the fullness of the kingdom that comes through Jesus Christ. Even the temple or the tabernacle, which was like an early version of the temple in the Old Testament. What is a temple in the New Testament? You and me. We are a temple. God lives in us. And so, and as we go around doing things, if we do it with the Spirit of God, we're doing it as if God were doing it. And He is dwelling with us. So all these things that we learn back here, even though we're no longer under that covenant, under that system of law, it's so much to learn in practical application to what we're doing today as Christians. Some of the laws that we're going to be looking at, they get a little bit tedious, but and I mean, from our standpoint, when you're dealing with bondservants, like we're just leaving that subject this morning. Yet here you understand not only what the will of God is, but you see the wisdom of God. If you want to know how to be fair and just, read these laws and understand them. It tells you just exactly how you should treat your neighbor, or how you should treat a stranger, or how you should handle an offense that is done to you, and these things that aren't spelled out specifically in the New Testament. The principles are here in the Old Covenant. So that's important to see that and to benefit from it as we can. Even though the laws aren't binding on us, the principles are age-lasting. Okay, so we're going to get in here, and I think I might have to click this first, and then, here we go. We left off with verse 2 here of Exodus chapter 21, if you buy a Hebrew servant. And we spent some time talking about that and how that's not something our Western culture is that used to. And we left one verse we didn't read last week. I'd like to read, because let's see the situation that happens if you happen to be a person, a Hebrew that was poor and needed to go into service for 7 years, is how it was to be. No longer than that. This is what would happen at the end of your service. Deuteronomy 15, verse 12. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, okay, it's 6 years, I guess, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you send him away free from you, you shall not let him go away empty-handed. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your winepress, from what the Lord has blessed you with. You shall give to him. You shall remember that you were a bondservant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this thing today. So that was the attitude that a master was to have who had a bondservant. It was time for them to go out the 7th year, weren't to send him out so he'd be on the street. He would give him some provisions and some supplies, and he would set him up a little bit to be on his own. And remember, you were in bondage, is what the Lord says. And you were in a situation. And so that's was going to see that come up again and again. When it talks about some of these situations. Remember, you were in this situation, God says. So that's basically helps us a lot with how to learn how to love one another, is that put yourself in their shoes. Okay, you were a slave once. You were a servant of Egypt once. Remember that. So now you treat your bondservants well, is what the principle is. Do I need that other microphone, Matt? I can stay behind here. I think the microphone showed up and the preacher attached to it. Okay. Anyway, we'll just get by with, and I'll just mostly stick behind the pulpit here this morning. All right, let's head on now down to the next, to verse 12, I guess it is. Is that right? Verse 6, how did I go? How am I jumping to verse 12? Wait a minute, let me back up here. Am I skipping stuff? Uh-oh. What did I do here, people? You know, I think I might have got that out of order. We may have to read that out of the actual Bible. Let me go back and check. I'm sorry. This is not something that I usually do. All right. I'm going to have to get my glasses. No, maybe I'm okay. So I should be at 7. That's going to kind of be interesting. Sometimes you get things out of order when you use these visual aids. Well, let's look, verse 7 here of Exodus 21. And if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go. I think we covered this last week, though. Yeah, we did. We covered this last. So I'm going to skip over that and go on. We talked about the reason it was different with if somebody put his daughter into service. So we're good. We're going to go on. Mistake I made was I thought I made a mistake. No. Not really. That was a mistake nonetheless. Verse 12. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. Now remember back in Genesis, clear back in chapter 9, there's a principle God lays down for how that when somebody is murdered, this is how this person is to be treated. Back there in verse 5 of Genesis 9, surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of a man, from the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of a man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. Okay. Any exceptions to this? Yes, there are. In fact, we're going to read about that in the very next verse. So is it every situation where you happen to do something that ends up in somebody dying, is that going to be where you need to be put to death? There's going to be some exceptions, and some of these principles are going to handle this. If you're out to murder somebody, no, you're going to be put to death. Verse 13, however, if he did not lie in wait, but God delivered him into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place where he may flee. What does that mean? God delivered him into his hand. What do you think? If he didn't lie in wait, if he wasn't on purpose trying to kill somebody, but he ends up killing the guy. Any possibilities you can think of? God delivered him into his hand. Don, hold on for the mic there.
It seems to me that whatever happened in the Old Testament, people seem to think that it was all part of God's plan, you know. So anything that happened to them, or anything that happened, period. Mm-hmm. See, you know, just in reading the Old Testament, you say, well, God did this. God, why is God? You know, even in the Psalms, you know, David writes, and other people write a lot that you know, why have you forsaken us? Why is this going on? Why are you doing this to us? So it seems to me like that's what the prevailing thought was.
That wasn't just the thought. That's actually the revelation.
That
God delivered him into his hand. It says that if something like that happens, then it basically was God's will, right? Mm-hmm. That this person die. I can think of a few scenarios. Can you? I mean, here I'm out putting my fence posts in, you know, and I'm knocking him into the ground. I grab this one and swing it around, and bang, that guy walking down the street. I didn't mean to hit him in the head, and he dies. So accidental. or some people wrestling, like we'll see in just a bit, have some disagreement and they wrestle together and somebody gets pushed over and falls and hits his head on a rock. Well, that's not murder one, you know, that's accidental, that's manslaughter, or whatever you want to call it, accidental death. So there was principles for that. I mean, that's what the scenarios that I'm thinking of that could be possible. He didn't intend to kill the person. Okay. But if a man acts with premeditation against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. So apparently for a while, the altar was the place that a person would grab onto and then be safe until the judges, and we'll see a lot about judges coming up, till he had a chance to go before the judges. And then later on, there's going to be, when they do occupy the land of Canaan, there are going to be cities of refuge that are all designated, that if you happen to kill somebody by accident or whatever, you ran to that city, and the relative who was responsible of making sure justice would be taken would go there, and then you go before the justices and find out, okay, does he deserve to be put to death or not? Okay? Okay, verse 15. And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So just for hitting your parents. Now, again, if you're trying to beat your parents up or something, that's a death penalty. The respect toward the parents. That goes back to the very basic, one of the 10 commandments, honor your father and mother. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. Kidnapping, capital crime. And we talked about that a little bit when we talked about bondservants, that our practice back in our history earlier on of going and capturing natives from African nations and bringing them in and forcing them into servitude, all that was worthy of death for whoever was responsible for that. That's not something that God allows. Verse 17, we even go a little bit further as far as parents and children. He who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. I don't know if that necessarily meant a word that wasn't, but if rather than respecting your parents, you curse them and you abuse them and you will not, obey them, that's a capital crime. Again, remember, one of the basic 10 commandments, honoring your father and mother, was very important and is very important to the Lord. Okay, moving on down. Oh, we got that already. Verse 18. If men contend with each other, here's another example of, things that men ever contend with each other. You ever see guys wrestling around because they have a disagreement? That's not right. It's not good. But if they contend with each other and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but is confined to his bed. So what now what do you do? Does this guy go and get his life taken away because they've had a tussle and they've went too far? Well, verse 19, if he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, then he who struck him shall be acquitted. He shall only pay for the loss of his time and shall provide for him to be thoroughly healed. So he's got some expenses he's going to have to pay, and it may take a little while, and he's going to have to take care of him and pay for his expenses and his loss of time. And then this is something where, again, it's not on purpose. I didn't mean to, but it happened, kind of thing. And if a man or beast, verse 24, if a man beats his male or female servant with a rod so that he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Again, the judges are going to have to deal with this. If he intended to kill him, that's a different story. But if it happens to be that he just went too far and he dies, then he shall be punished. It doesn't say what the punishment is, because again, it doesn't appear to be intentional murder here. Verse 21, notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his property. Talk about that word in just a minute. So in other words, if you overdo disciplining your servants and one of them dies, let's see here, then there'll be punishment, notwithstanding if they remain alive. Now, who's going to take care of him if he remains alive? The master. He's going to have the expense of nursing this servant that he went too far and disciplined too hard until he gets back to where he can be okay and can work again. So he's going to be responsible for him anyway. So a little bit different than somebody who's not a servant. Okay, how about this? And he shall not be punished, for he is his property. Okay. Literally, that means he is his money. This is a financial situation. He has an investment in here, and so there's a difference in the justice because of this. And you might think, well, property, that sounds pretty bad. We don't have something very different today that happens continually in our nation and has for ages. Have you ever seen a guy walk around with a shirt that says property of the U.S. Navy or something like that? I see it once in a while. Are they property of the U.S. Navy? Well, kinda. In a way they are. You think about, their situation just about in every sense. He who enlists in the Army or in the Navy or in the Air Force or any other military service, is he free to go about doing whatever he wants? Can he wear the clothes he wants to wear? When he's on duty? No, he's got to wear what he's told. And so in that sense, he's got to cut it. Can he wear his hair wherever? No, there's a standard. He can't decide what he's going to do with his life from day to day. How many hours he works, who decides that? Does he decide that? Nope. Well, in a way you can. Okay, so any job though, you can quit whenever you want to. Can you quit the Navy whenever you want to? No, you can't. You're indentured. You got to serve for 2 years or 4 years or whatever that period of time is that you're enlisted for or that you're serving. So, and nobody says that. I mean, so they're bond servants by every way you can possibly imagine. They're bond servants of the nation, and they serve in the military. So again, that's sure property of the U.S. Navy. Yeah, the U.S. Navy basically owns their service for a number of years, and so I think that's kind of what this is not demeaning in that sense. It's a reality that's something why this law is the way it is. Florento.
The Bible acknowledged the existence of slavery, but the wording "for he is his property," does that mean that the Bible encourages slavery? For a man to own another man as his property.
Were you here last week?
Pardon me?
Were you here last week?
No.
No, I don't think you were. Go and listen to watch the class because we looked into the situations of why would there be bond service? And there was a couple of situations where this is the way that it worked out, and it was fair and just. And so I'm encouraging you to do that, is to look at that, because we covered some of that ground already. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Mike, scratching your head, or you got your hand up? Which one? Okay. All right. You're giving me an interesting look. You good? Okay. All right. Moving on, or do we want to talk about that some more? Let's move on. There we go. Verse 22. If men fight and hurt a woman with child, now here's interesting. This isn't just a woman out there. They're fighting, and this woman gets in the way, and boom, they knock her over, and there's some injury done. This is a woman with child, so very specific. Okay, if they hurt a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman husband imposes on him. Going to be a fine. There's going to be some kind of thing that he's going to have to do to make this right. And he shall pay as the judges determine. Okay. So here we're going to see this judge. The things that we're talking about here are things of not personal retribution. It's going to be, this is the civil code. And you have courts and judges that will determine how this is going to work out. So if no harm follows, judges will say, yeah, okay, you owe this much, so much money. Verse 23, but if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burned, wound for a wound, stripe for stripe. Can you get any more specific and detailed than that? Pretty hard. So, let's talk about this part about the woman with the unborn child, first of all, and then go on and see this standard now that is going to be set for justice. This is justice. And really what it is that the punishment should fit the crime. That's in general what the principle is. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. But let's look back here and see. So if the child dies, the unborn child, then life for life, right? So then whoever is responsible for that unborn child dying is going to take his life. Which means that when you kill an unborn child, what is it? Murder. Now, it's a little bit tricky here because they didn't intend to kill this woman's child, so that, it's accidental. It's kind of like the guys that are in a tussle and one of them goes too far and, that kind of thing. But this is spelled out. Because if there's harm that follows, then life for life. I think that's a necessary conclusion, that if the baby loses its life and the life of the one responsible for taking it, causing it, is going to give his life. Any discussion on that whole question about abortion, and we're not going to go in it too deep, but this looks like, look, that makes abortion a sin before God. And that's actually intentionally taking the life of this unborn child. This was really an accident, and even it drew the death penalty. I mean, from what I can see. Okay, nobody's raising their hands, we'll keep going. Let's talk about this. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn. It was applied in two different ways, and we're going to see that. Sometimes it was, except for the fact when somebody, if murder, it's always you take the life of the murderer. But depending upon how the circumstances around the harm that was done, sometimes the punishment was equal, but not. Well, let's just keep going on here and just see what I'm talking about. Well, let's see here. Yeah, let's go back to where we just were a few verses ago. 21 verse 18. If men contend with each other and one strikes the other with a stone, then strike him with a stone? No, it doesn't say that here. Okay. Though literally that's what you would do, right? If he got hit with a stone, you hit him back. No, that would be the judgment it looked like it could be, but in this sense, no, that's not what happens. If he doesn't die, if he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, and then he who struck him shall be acquitted. He shall pay for the loss of time. There's going to be an equal amount of restitution to match the harm done. He didn't go before the judge, and the judge takes a rock and hits him in the head. I mean, so I'm just saying, sometimes it was applied so that there was a practical penalty that offset the harm. And so, and sometimes it was a little different. Well, let's jump over there. Right now, Leviticus, it looks like the application here, same kind of context we're talking about here in Leviticus. Chapter 24, verse 17. Whoever kills any man shall surely be put to death. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, animal for animal. If a man causes disfigurement of his neighbor, as he has done, so shall it be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he has caused disfigurement of a man, so shall it be done to him. And whoever kills an animal shall restore it, but whoever kills a man shall be put to death. You shall have the same law for the stranger and for the one and for one from your own country, for I am the Lord your God. So, an eye for an eye in the justice system sometimes mean if I went viciously and went and hurt somebody and disfigured him, the judges would have disfigured me. I mean, it's too literal in this passage, unless you think it'd be otherwise. It's just too literal. Sometimes, though, like we had in the example there just a few minutes ago, sometimes you just restore and have the master or have the person bring him back to health and pay for the expenses. So, who decides which way to go? We'll see. It's going to be the judges. The judges who are in charge will know by experience and maybe from Moses to begin with, know how to apply these things. Mike.
Within a system of justice, there are two aspects of a judgment that is rendered. There is the aspect of restoration, a restorative aspect, especially when it involves property or money or something of that effect. There's also a punitive aspect, because you can't have a system that says, well, if you commit a crime, just pay me a certain amount and you're okay. There needs to be a punishment that an individual receives, and that punishment, at least as the model of the Old Testament shows us, also takes into mind many times the intent of the one who committed the crime.
Yes, very much so. That's
so
important.
That's what the cities of refuge were about. God recognized that, that living in many ways was dangerous at that time. I mean, you had oxen that could trample a person. You had.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
You had buildings that weren't very safe, and somebody, is injured or killed, in some kind of accident like that. And so it's not always just he struck him with his fist or a stone. There's other ways in which an individual could be injured in such a way as to die. And
Yes.
so those things needed to be satisfied, and God, in his wisdom, determined ways in which that could be done.
My understanding, I'll get you in a minute, Don, is that here in this Leviticus, that to me, that if it was, again, this is just my judgment, I'm not the judge here. If it was intentional, then it bore a heavier physical consequence. If it was accidental, or you did something and it would just, oh no, then there would be some other penalty attached that wasn't as severe, depending on the intent, like you said there. You going to finish what you're saying? Go ahead.
Yeah, so even in the book of Hebrews, it points out, I think it's in chapter 10, where he talks about the one who goes on and sins intentionally, has no redemption. In other words, if you continue in that frame of mind,
Yes.
there is no salvation involved for someone who has openly rebelled, and in some instances he says, trampled underfoot the blood of Christ and so on.
Yes, yes. Okay, Don.
I remember someone said, an eye for an eye. If we all followed that law, eventually everybody would be blind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if we did it.
Makes me think of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, I believe, about not doing the eye for an eye thing.
Let's wait on that one.
But loving your neighbor.
Let's
but
wait on that
loving.
one.
Okay.
Because we're going to see what Jesus does with this principle. And we're going to see, I believe, that he doesn't abrogate, he doesn't cancel it. He corrects a misuse of it, is my understanding. So right now, that's why I'm emphasizing here, this is the judges are determining what to be. You don't run out there and take vengeance yourself. That was never to be the case. And we'll read some Old Testament passages that say that. You're supposed to take it to the judge. The judges will decide what happens here. Okay, so why is God, God gives us a reason other than just that it's right to follow these kinds of judgments, but there's even a deeper reason. And here's a verse that tells us one. Ecclesiastes 8, verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. That's what happens when you don't punish crimes. When you don't have a criminal, someone who does wrong, held accountable and punished for it, then so many other people say, well, look, we can do whatever we want. We can break into stores, steal all this merchandise. Nothing's going to happen to us. What does not punishing that particular activity result in? So many more people break into stores until you can't even go down the streets of San Francisco without being afraid. So again, not only are these laws good and right and just, but they are wise. This is God's wisdom. This isn't my opinion. It's God's wisdom. So look, if you don't do this, you're going to have anarchy. Okay, Florento.
The wording eye for an eye was instituted for judges as a rule. It wasn't made for personal relationship or to justify revenge.
Yes.
The intent of the Bible, I believe personally, is to make the punishment fit the crime.
Yes.
And this is in order to prevent cruel and barbaric punishment that is very prominent in ancient society and even up to now in our modern lives. And that exists, and that's the reason why the rule was made.
Yes, and not only should the punishment fit the crime, but it shouldn't matter whether you're rich or poor. We're going to see that too, that if you're rich, you don't take it easy on the rich. If you're poor, you don't take it easy on the poor. Everybody treated the same. Justice for all, right? Not just the American way, truth and justice for all. It's not just Superman's way. I think that was into Superman's. It's God's way. Michael.
I forget exactly who it was, but there was a law enforcement official who was giving a news conference and talking about the certain period of time in which approximately 500 crimes had been committed, and they effectively traced it down to 10 people.
Oh,
10
wow.
people who were committing all of these crimes. Even if you spread that out evenly, that's 50 times, 50 crimes per person.
Yeah.
And that's because they weren't, as Ecclesiastes 8 says, because their punishment was not, carried out. They were just put back out onto the street to commit crime over and over again.
And not just him, but his neighbors too. Because
Right.
look, hey, Joe did this and he's home. Well, I'm gonna go do that.
Well, no doubt it's greater
I
than
need
that.
a new mink coat.
No doubt it's greater than that, because in this situation where crime has no consequence, people don't report crime. So
Yeah,
the
right.
crimes that are committed that people don't even bother to report because they know nothing will come of it.
And you look over, I'm not sure if you've been reading the news out of what's happening in the country of Ecuador, and the gang violence, and how that the government is losing control over it completely until it's the gangs. I mean, if they would have treated the gangs the way they should have, drug lords, as soon as it cropped up, then they wouldn't have the huge amount of gang problem they have today. I mean, it applies to every situation. When evil is done, it needs to be punished. Looking on to another verse that reflects the same thing, and here's a different crime though. Let's look at this one, Deuteronomy 19 verse 17. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away evil from among you. So if he said, well, look, he came and he stole, 5 of my cows, well, or whatever, then you need to, and it was wrong, he was lying, then take away 5 of his, or, of his cattle. Equality there. And again, let's look on to see the reason. You shall put away evil from among you, and those who remain shall hear and fear. And hereafter they shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eyes shall not pity. Life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So again, one of the reasons God has these just laws and wants them to be applied is so that there won't be crime running rampant everywhere. People will be afraid, as we should be, from disobeying the government who's responsible for keeping the peace. Okay. Notice here, again, we've got this judges will determine. This is a judicial situation. This is not retribution. You decide on your own and you're going to take care of this guy who lied against you and you're going to, punish him personally. No, the judges shall take care of you. It's really clear that this is what the intention was. We're going to see something, I think, different that Jesus talks about when he talks about some of these verses here. But it's the judges that are to be responsible for taking care of the evil that's being done. So let's go to Matthew, as Don was trying to do a few minutes ago. You guys are often ahead of where we are. Not at all. I love it. People are thinking. So now we come to the New Testament. Well, actually, this is between the Testament. This is before the law is in effect. He's still under the old law. But he speaks about this principle that we've been reading about. In verse 38 of chapter 5, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In fact, who said that? Moses. Who told Moses to say that? Okay, so you heard that it was said, but I tell you. Now, does that mean he's contradicting his father, that wasn't a good principle to have? There's something wrong with, no. And it doesn't say here clearly, but I think what we're seeing here is, and we can add some verses up, people were misusing this law and taking it as the justification and authority to take personal vengeance against their neighbor. And that was never intended that way. There's a whole different principle for that. When your neighbor wrongs you personally, you're supposed to love them and treat them well. And we'll see a couple of verses about that. So Jesus, and when he, in this particular chapter, he corrects a number of misunderstandings of how the old law is used. And you can go back and see that if you were to look through there. But this is a case where he's correcting an abuse. He says, but I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. We're not going to go into the principles here very deeply, but I'm just saying this is what he's saying. He's saying this is something how you should treat somebody individually. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You're generous and kind and loving and giving, even to your enemies, is the principle. If we look over it real quickly to Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Beloved, do not avenge yourself. And I think that's the principle Jesus was dealing with. But rather give place to the wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. That's an Old Testament verse, Deuteronomy 32, verse 5. Principle that existed in the Old Testament. God's going to repay. So individually, you don't take vengeance. Okay, says the Lord, verse 20, therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you heap coals of fire on his head. That's not a New Testament verse. That's an Old Testament verse. You treat your enemies well. Proverbs 25, verse 21. And so treating your enemy properly didn't begin with Jesus' teaching. It was something he reinforced, but this was something they were always supposed to do. The whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was a judicial court system principle that judges need to be impartial, law needs to be equal for all, and needs to be measured out according to the crime. That's how, and that's not the way it was done a lot of times. A lot of times it was who you were. You know, that's how you got judged, or any of that stuff. Sam back there.
For sure, he's kind of making sure people don't take, the commandment and kind of just get wrapped around it, right? And just say, oh, I'm going to count everything that's done against me, and they're going to get it. They're going to get theirs, right? I'll make sure they get, it's in the vengeance kind of and judgment area where you're judging other people and saying, hey, they deserve this. He's teaching us that to make sure to do that. But he's also trying to teach us more than that. I think that God has always tried to teach his people, and through the commandments, is how to love one another. Mm-hmm. That we put grace and mercy as a great importance.
Yes.
And when you put mercy into the category, exact justice is going to not always be there.
Yes.
As we study 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where love does not take into account a wrong suffered. Yes. That's a lot. He was starting to try to teach us that concept of what love should be capable of doing.
That's right.
When you have an enemy, you're not going to want that eye back. If there's a person that you want the best for, but they go off the handle and they push you, and you fall off a balcony or something, you have the capability to say, I'm going to forgive you for that. Mm-hmm. I'm in the hospital now, and I'm going to forgive you.
If you live from the fall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that my point is that the person's you could have died, right? They deserve justice, right? But it is in the power of the persons to say, I'm not going to charge him, right?
Now, why should we treat people that way? Why should we be so forgiving and merciful and patient with people when they wrong us, even intentionally? Because that's how we were treated. You don't want to love somebody? Then you're not like your Lord. We're talking about that in 1 John, aren't we? Is that you love your brother. That doesn't mean if he deserves to be loved. That just means you love him. And that's what was being said in these principles, and what Jesus was talking about, how you treat those who wronged you. You treat those who wronged you like God treats those of us, which is everyone, who's wronged him. Love and mercy and forgiveness. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be a judgment day. Yes, there is, where justice will be done. But right now, we're to be living a life like Jesus did, with full of mercy. Yes, Mike?
It's interesting, isn't it, that when Jesus speaks of the situation in Matthew 5, he calls those individuals who cause other people harm evil. And yet he asks us to forgive. You know, so it's not like we just say, everything's skippy, you're fine, go on your way, you know, be happy. You know.
Yeah.
We still recognize that someone has done us harm. And in those instances where they threaten to do other people harm, of course, we can't forgive them for what they do to other people. And nor should we ignore the harmful behavior that they're practicing, you know. And so there's the ability to forgive, but at the same time, there's also the need in a system of equity to correct that individual who is causing harm.
Sure.
And, you know, just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, let's get back up here again. We're talking about these principles. Romans brings this up. And one more verse and we'll be out of time here, I think, and we'll be done with this particular subject. Though, again, it is a principle that's all the way through the Old Testament, and God expected them to follow. Here's a principle again for you and me today. Romans 13, verse 3, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he, that is a ruler, he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. So we wait for the vengeance of God. We as individuals are to treat people with mercy, our friends, our enemies, as best we can. And then when it comes to the courts or the nation, the authority, they are responsible for taking the vengeance God wants to be taken for people who will not do right. Let's see. Yeah, vengeance belongs to the Lord. And we're at... Oh, did I have the... Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry about that. 32, let's go back there. Okay, we are out of time. 32:35? Okay, I'll go back and fix that. Thank you for your participation this morning. We're going to take a break for 10 minutes and come back together and worship our God in the assembly.